Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a quick run through of the books that I read in the month of February. February was a surprisingly good reading month for me. I read 9 books in total. I think I did. One sec. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I read 8 books in total. I lied. And I have to say though, I read some really good books. And then I also read some not so good books. So it was a pretty balanced month in terms of what I read. But without further ado, let's just jump into what I read, what ratings I gave it, and what are my kind of very high level summary thoughts of the book. So the first book that I read in the month of February was The Maleficent Seven. This is a book by Cameron Johnston. It is a standalone, and you're essentially following like a ragtag group of supernatural beings as they try to save a village. And I do have a review coming out of this soon. It's very funny, it's quite tongue-in-cheek, and it's quite an enjoyable read. Like if you're looking for something that's quite fluffy, but like still grim and still dark, then it's got a good balance of that, I think. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I just thought that some of it was a little bit far-fetched and some of the humor did fall a little bit flat for me. Just a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit. And I still think a 4 is pretty solid, but I enjoyed it. You'll get more of my thoughts in my full review. The second book that I read this month was The Company by KJ Parker. This was mine and Alan's KJ Parker pick for the month. So Alan has this thing where his Patreons can submit book requests for him to read when he spins this wheel. The wheel, when he spins it, will pick a random book. And the random pick that it picked was The Company. So Alan and I are reading a KJ Parker book a month. We often alternate between a full-length novel and then a novella. Given that we were due a novel and given that it's obviously KJ Parker, I ended up just picking up The Company as well. We read it at the same time and I have a review of this out already, and it's just, guys, I think it's probably got to be one of my favorite Parker books so far, maybe just behind The Folding Knife, but it's phenomenal. The character work is just out of this world. I'll link down my review below because I go into a lot of detail on that stuff, but I gave it 5 stars. Obviously, this man can literally do no wrong at this point. I loved it. It was so good. One of the darkest books I've ever read, genuinely. Next, I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is a sci-fi book that got a lot of love last year. I feel like it was everywhere on BookTube and Bookstagram and everybody was talking about it. I was not that fussed, to be perfectly honest. I gave it a 3.75. The humor was just terrible, in my opinion. It's not my humor, and I didn't like it. I thought it was really just over the top, and I think the main character was a little bit dumb as well sometimes, which for a scientist who is in space, you would expect a little bit more than that. There was one thing that really saved it for me, and that was the relationship between our main character and this other character that comes on further on the book. If you've read the book, you will probably know who I'm talking about. I do have a review coming out of this soon. It might already be up. So if you want to see more about that, definitely go watch it. The next book I read was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I listened to this as an audiobook. I also listened to Project Hail Mary, by the way. I started reading the physical book and it wasn't working for me. The audiobook worked a lot better. But anyway, Pride and Prejudice. The audiobook was narrated by Rosamund Pike, the actress who is actually in the Pride and Prejudice film. She plays Jane Bennet, and she just did an absolutely wonderful job of narrating that book. I just felt so immersed in it, and I read Pride and Prejudice when I was in school, so when I was, 14, 15, 16, and I hated it, not because I hated the book, but because I just hated the way that they taught literature in school, and I'm so glad that I decided to pick it up because it's given me a new appreciation or a renewed appreciation of Jane Austen, and her writing is phenomenal, the themes that she tackles are phenomenal, and they're still very relevant to today, and I loved it, and I obviously gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read was House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. This was a disappointment. I was so angry. That ending just really pissed me off. I'm going to be doing a review of this soon. I doubt it will be up by the time this video goes up, but you know how I said in my last rant review that was probably going to be the only one? I was wrong. I'm not looking forward to doing that review. Nothing worked for me. I gave it 3 stars, but I feel like I need to give it less because I'm so frustrated with that book, and I don't think Sarah J. Maas's writing is getting any better. I actually think it's getting worse. Anyway, I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'm just going to start going into my rant now, which is not going to be helpful to anybody. The next book that I read was No Place for Peace by Tom Dumbrell. This is the second book in the Pillars of Peace trilogy. Tom, I've mentioned before on my channel, and I've mentioned his first book on my channel before I did a review of it. I will link it down below. Really great kind of I don't really want to call it fantasy because there's no magic in it. There's very little magic in it. So I don't really want to call it a fantasy trilogy, but it's in service of fantasy fans, I think. So if you do like fantasy, I think you would enjoy it for sure. And I really liked it. I think the pacing was insane. And I think the development of certain characters, especially Cyrus, was just fantastic. I really, really enjoyed the development of his character. I also love the fact that we got to follow a really unlikable character. We got to follow a character called Wendell. He's really snivelly, really sly. And like, I just love that we got to follow that perspective, because you never really get that perspective. You normally follow the hero. And I really enjoyed it. And I ended up giving it a 4.25. I think Tom is a really excellent writer, and I think you can definitely see influences of fantasy that I've read in his writing, and I really liked it. It was also slightly darker in tone, which I really appreciated. The next book that I read was The Death of Ivan Ilyich. This is by Leo Tolstoy. This is the first book by any Russian that I've ever read. Well, that's not entirely true, because I've read a lot of philosophy from the Russians. But first fiction book that I've read from one of the fathers of Russian literature. I loved it. I will be doing a review of this. That book spoke to me in so many ways. I've been recovering from quite a serious illness over the last couple of months. I'm fine now. But when you are going through that and you're living through that, through the pain and through the physical pain and the emotional pain, and not only the pain that you yourself are feeling, but the pain that your loved ones are facing as well because you're sick. Oh, he just encapsulated it so well. There's one section in that book that I've reread about 10 times because I love it, and I will talk about that in my review. But I gave it a 4.5. I might end up bumping it up to a 5, but it spoke to me in a way that I didn't expect, and I loved it. The last book that I read this throughout the entire month of February, and that is The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker. I've been wanting to read Baker for a while. I've been a little bit nervous picking up his books because I know they're, quite dense. People mention him in the same vein as they mention Stephen Erikson, who I've also not read yet. But I was really interested in the premise. I was really interested in the fact there's lots of religious and philosophical thematic work that is done in the book. And so I picked it up. Originally, I was planning to read all 3 books in the same month. Don't do that. Like, if you've not read Erikson and you've not read writing the way that Baker writes, I would recommend doing it the way that I did it, which was I read 1 chapter a day. Some days I didn't read anything because I was just too tired. But I loved it. I thought it was a really solid entryway into the world. I think Baker's writing is absolutely stunning. And as a result of that, I will be picking up The Warrior Prophet in the month of March, which I'm super excited about. I ended up giving this a 4.5 stars. The only thing that really prevented me from giving it more than that was just because there's a lot of names. There's a lot of names, and it's a lot. It's a lot. Some of my friends who were reading it said they found it okay, but that's because they've read Malazan, so they're used to lots of names and places and characters and all of that stuff. I'm not really used to that though, so it was a lot for me, and I had to keep remembering who was who. By the end of the book though, it was okay, and I kind of got over it. This is one of those books that I might end up bumping up once I finish the series. I have a feeling that Baker has done a lot of foundational work to set up the trilogy, so I feel like we'll appreciate that more as we go throughout the trilogy. So as you can see, it was a pretty mixed bag. I mean, I didn't give anything below a 3 stars, which I think is pretty solid. And most books were actually 4 stars or above, apart from House of Sky and Breath. It was a good month. I read quite a lot of dark books in that month. It's covering some pretty dark stuff, I have to say. But hey, it's a reflection of my mood, I guess. So anyway, let me know what you guys read in the month of March. I had a great reading month. I was pretty happy with the books that I read, and I read a lot more than I thought I would. Definitely let me know what you read, especially if there are any new favorites or any non-favorites, and let's take the conversation down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one. Stay safe, everybody. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.